Whenever I was born, they named me Richard, and then whenever I started in school, they checked me in school as Richard. Around the house, being I guess a baby and then a little boy, I guess they felt like Richard seemed to be too big of a name to tag a little small boy with, and so around the house they started calling me Ricky. So at home it was Ricky, at church it was Ricky, and whenever I would go to school it would be Richard. And then when I turned 16, my neighbor got me a job at Cromer's Peanuts in Dutch Square, and he introduced me as Rick. So whenever I would answer the telephone at the house, whenever I was 17 years old, I would say hello, and they'd say, "Who's this?" And I would say, "Well, it depends on who this is." Because if they knew me from church, then I was Ricky. If they knew me from work, I was Rick. If they knew me from school, I was Richard. With 17, I just decided I don't want to go through life like this. I'm going to pick one name and stick with it. And since most people, which was, when I say most, that's school, when most people knew me as Richard, I said, that's the one I'm going to pick. It's my proper name. And so I said, from this day forward, that's who I'm going to answer when someone asks me my name. And I went to my parents, and I thought it would take them a long time to adjust. But I told them, I said, call me what you want to, but starting today, when anyone asks me my name, it's going to be Richard. And within 2 weeks, my parents had it all worked out, and they started calling me Richard, and have ever since. My name is Richard Coleman, and I'm the pastor at Shepherd Church of the Nazarene in Lexington, South Carolina. And it's great to be able to spend just a few moments with you today. Been looking in Samuel, and we're at the place where David has looked at the giant Goliath, and he said, I think I can defeat him. And so people hear him saying that, and they're pretty desperate. They make mention to the king that there's somebody out here that thinks. And so I imagine when David walks in, the one that's been playing the harp for him for all this time, and David says, look, I think I can beat that guy. And King Saul looks at him and says, you're only a boy. How in the world? And this is a seasoned fighter, not to mention he's 9 feet tall. How do you think you could possibly do that? And David said, well, he said, as a shepherd, he said, I've been attacked by bears and I killed the bear. He said, I've been attacked by lions and I've killed the lions. He said, I can do the same thing with this joker. He said, just give me a chance. He said, God will be with me. And for whatever reason, Saul said, okay, if you want to give it a shot, we'll give it a shot. And so Saul gets his armor and his helmet and all of that and his sword, and he gives it all to David. He said, put this stuff on. Now, we can only imagine. Saul, the Bible tells us that Saul was a head taller than almost any of the other Israelites. So Saul was a big man. And he's taking all of this armor that fits him, and he's putting it on David. And the scripture tells us that David put it on and then tried to walk around with it, and David just shook his head and said, this is not going to work. Have you ever tried to wear somebody else's armor? Have you ever tried to fill somebody else's shoes? I believe oftentimes, I would say that many people have failed in their jobs, have failed in their agendas, because they were trying to fill someone else's shoes. They were trying to wear someone else's clothes. They were trying to take on someone else's personality. I know when I first became a pastor, when God called me to be a pastor, I'm thinking, Well, seems like maybe there ought to be some minister that I could look at, or some great preacher that has always been a success, and see how they did it and so forth, and maybe I could do the same thing. But it didn't take too long for me to realize that God called Billy Graham to be Billy Graham, and God called all of these other great ministers to be who they were, and they were all different, and they had different ways of being able to tell God's good news. And I realized that if God called me, which I knew He did, then God expects me to use the gifts and graces that He has given me. And I don't need to mimic someone else. I don't need to act like someone else or try to be someone that I am not. God called me because He wanted me to be the person that I am. And one thing that He does, He wants me to do my very best. He wants me to work hard. He wants me to always be as enthusiastic and be open to God's counsel. Certainly my prayer is constantly for God to give me wisdom, to be able to see things just a little bit like He sees them. Before I get up and do one of these messages or one on Sunday, my prayer is always that God would show me something in that scripture that maybe I haven't seen before, or maybe that I can express some way, either through a camera or from the pulpit, to allow somebody to see something that will be true in their life. Because if we tell a Bible story and it's only relating history, then what have we done? You see, to me, that Bible story needs to be able to relate to my life and to your life, to show us what we can do to be able to step forward and move forward and draw closer to God. And so when I look at this story of David trying to wear Saul's armor, I realize that we don't need to do that. And if you're trying to do that today, whether it's at work or whether it's at church or whatever it may be, you just need to stop. And you need to say, God, you made me unique. Show me and help me to be the person that you would have me to be. And when you witness or when you encourage someone or whatever it is that you may be doing to try to push forward the gospel, then we need to do it as the people that we are. You know, the other thing I found out about that, if I am just myself, then I realize that I'm comfortable in my clothes, that I'm comfortable in my own skin because this is who I am. When people ask me questions, they'll say, well, tell me what kind of preacher you are. And I'll say, well, I said, I'm not that great of a preacher, but I'm short-winded, and that ought to go a long way. And usually they'll laugh, and we'll move on from there. I try to study, I try to be prepared, and then I just let God have His way with the rest of it. I don't have to compete, and you don't either. God made you. God knows your name. The Bible even tells us that God has a special name prepared for each and every one of us. And so I may end up with a fourth name. It may not be Richard anymore, but whatever it is, God will know me. He knows me now by who I am. And He is the one that I want to please. And He is the one that I want to hear say my name. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you. May you truly be able to experience God in a fresh and a new way this week. Thanks for taking the time and watching today.